Welcome back to Let's Tab 59. So another interview today, this time with this young lady sat next to me, Stephanie. Stephanie, welcome.
Hello.
To Let's Tab 59. So rather than interviewing a veteran, this young lady sat next to me, not a veteran. She's what we used to call in the army or in the armed forces in the UK, a Pad Brat. So she was a child of a serving member of the armed forces, and very affectionately we used to call them Pad Brats. So she was a dependent whilst in the army. So Stephanie.
Yeah.
So first of all, could you tell us when you were first aware that you were in the army? Basically, you were a child attached to the army and of a dependent. Can you remember the first sort of awareness of that?
Yeah, I do really. My first sort of memory of it all really was I was quite young, maybe about 3 years old, and my dad was deployed to Bosnia, and he came home, turned up at the door, all in his camo kit, and there was a knock at the door, and he was stood there with his teddy bear, and I hadn't seen him for about 7 months, and I always had a picture of him under my pillow. You know, I used to say, "Good night, Daddy, God bless, I love you," and say a little prayer with my mum and my brother. And to see him physically stood in the doorway just blew me away. I didn't know whether to hug him, run from him. I was very cautious. I was only young. So I'd definitely say that was quite a poignant moment for me to realise that my life was going to be completely different to a normal civilian child.
Yeah.
Really.
So because obviously at that age, at 3, you couldn't write letters or read letters.
No.
So you didn't get blues. Well, you did.
Yeah, I did. I remember my mum would sit and sort of explain what was going on in a terminology that I could sort of understand. But a lot of the blueies were pictures. He would draw pictures and, you know, little jokes and things in them.
Because he couldn't really speak on the phone much, I suppose, then.
No, there was none of that really.
So that was that. And plus, doubled with that, you weren't on married quarters then. You were in a private hiring.
Yeah, so I was influx with civilians. So at that age, the only way of me knowing that my father was a serving personnel was the kit he wore. You know, I'd see him go off to work in his uniform, see him come home. When he got deployed, obviously he was gone for months at a time. And it's quite hard, you know, especially back then, you didn't have like you do now.
It was confusing.
Yeah, it was very confusing. You don't have up-to-date technology back then. You know, it was... they were gone and you wait till they come home.
And then you were on married quarters.
Yes.
And you were about 5 years old?
About 5.
You hadn't started school, proper school?
No, I think I was due to start when we actually...
And you remember that, being on that married quarter?
Yes, it was really beautiful. I remember you taking us as a family with the dog to go and have a look at where we'd be moving to. And it was just big fields. You know, I was in a property where you came out the front door, you were on a road, and then we obviously were moving to the married quarters, and it was just amazing, so safe and just beautiful. Really.
And that's where you first went to school then? That was your first school, was on that patch, yeah?
Guston School, lovely school that was.
And that wasn't all military, was it? There was...
no, when we moved up...
Same as the patch, the school was a bit like the patch, it was a bit of a mixture.
Yes, there was...
But predominantly military, or...?
Yes, it was predominantly military. We had quite a few civilian kids in there, but I would say more military than civilian. So, you know, that helped me adjust to, I wasn't on my own.
Yeah. And I suppose the staff at the school were obviously very aware, you know, they had military kids.
Yeah, a lot of the staff were very aware. I mean, some actually had, you know, sons in the forces themselves or were married to military personnel. So, you know, that helped a heck of a lot as well. They understood the whole situation with everything.
So you're going to school there, which is only up the road from the house.
Yes.
So, you know, eventually you're walking to school.
Yeah, that was a bit of an adventure because the mums would stand at the door. You would leave your house and you'd go to the next house, pick up a friend. Their mum would be stood at the door, and then the last person would let the other mums know, yeah, the kids have got to school, they're safe.
I suppose that, you know, that's one of the benefits of being on a married quarter patch as a kid, I suppose, because you've got that network, You know, everyone being in the same boat. It's a real community spirit, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had more independence because it was safe to do that, you know.
And was there any like military stuff happening in the school? Did you get visits from anything and anyone turn up?
We used to have like people come in. Sometimes we had bands come in and stuff, and especially sort of when the Gurkhas arrived eventually, you know, we had an introduction with them. But yeah, we used to, obviously around poignant times, remembrance and stuff, we were, you know, learning about the wars and what a poppy meant and things like that. So it was really influxed in protecting the kids and, you know, helping them understand situations without...
That was a Church of England school, was it? I think?
Yes, it was Church of England
And
school.
the church you went to
was the church in Dover Castle.
That's right, the Garrison Church, wasn't it?
So we used to go and do our Christingles, harvest festivals. We used to go up to Dover Castle Church quite a lot.
And you were christened there?
Yes, I was.
In Dover Castle?
Yes. And
christened in Dover Castle, that's pretty
There was actually a reenactment going on the day, and I had my photo taken with
the Napoleonic soldiers,
the Napoleonic soldiers were there.
So that was all good. That was all ticking along. And of course, you were then sort of gently introduced to families' lunches and things like that.
Yeah.
In the Garrison Sergeants' Mess at Shorncliffe.
Shorncliffe, yeah. It was a good laugh. You know, all the kids were in the same boat as you know, and they'd have activities on, lunches. It was a good time.
It wasn't a scary thing like walking the Sergeant's Mess and all the cutlery.
No, it was really, I mean, obviously, you know, you had manners. All the kids were the same. Pleases, thank yous. Can I get down from the table? You know, even though it wasn't as strict as a sergeant mess dinner would be, the family days were more lightened, but there was just all sorts of things to do. It was really good.
And so that was all ticking along. And then separation again was a big thing, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, at the time,
just you and mum and
you know, it was
brother.
Yeah, it was just us three, but obviously we did have the support of other mothers with their children. So, you know, a lot of the time there was going around each other's houses for food, dinners and cups of tea, although I think most of the wives in the end were on the old bevies.
On the wine.
On a lot of wine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good support network. And, you know, some were off on training at different times to your dad, you know, so we just sort of ticked along together. It was
and helicopters landing in the sports fields.
Yeah, we'd be over on the field playing, and then next minute you'd hear this like, tuff, 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 and you'd look up in the sky and think, oh, there's a Chinook coming through. Right, everyone evacuate the field, you know, and we'd all dart off and watch them get out, and off they'd go again. So it was a real buzz. It was a real buzz. It was a shock for the civilians that were up there, you know.
Yeah, how did you get on? So initially, I suppose when you were really young up there, you didn't sort of notice that difference of them and us, civilians, and didn't have that.
No.
But that came later.
Yeah, that
at school or in the playground areas or?
Not so much in the school. I'd say it was more on the playgrounds of the actual Married Quarters.
Patch,
yeah, it definitely was later on that. But at the time, you know, I had military friends and civilian friends. The civilian friends I had, Dan and Shauna, they were really into the forces. You know, they'd sit there and jabber away like, what's it like, and all this stuff. So it was nice to have that sort of bond between the two, really. But it was definitely later on, as I got older, that I noticed the difference.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a challenge.
And I suppose at that age you weren't, although you knew your dad was in the army and that, you didn't sort of sense that he was in danger or anything because you were too young to understand. You thought he's away working.
Yeah, a lot of the time, you know, it was just, oh, he's gone away on an exercise, you know, because you did.
Or operate,
Yeah, you did quite a lot, but most of the time it was exercise and then off to an operations, you know. So I didn't really understand the situation then. It was more later on.
Around the Iraq time?
Yeah.
So how old did you?
I was about 9 years old when we deployed to Iraq.
And that was different this time, was it?
Yeah.
Compared to the others?
Yeah, really different. Because I was a lot more aware. I was quite wise for my age. Have a big interest in the military myself because of the family history. So, you know, I sort of comprehended a lot more what was going on. that was definitely the most poignant point of my life when I realised, actually, this is a lot more
serious sort of thing. Yeah, it's a little bit more worrying for you, and there's a lot to worry. I mean, you're only 9 years old, and you start, because you hear other kids talking about what they've heard going on, and old. Because you're still at the small school, the primary school.
Yeah, I was still in primary school when you were deployed to Iraq. In fact, you brought me my first little Nokia,
little brick phone. Yeah. Although you couldn't use that. You couldn't phone.
No,
only when I was pre-training.
Yeah, when you was pre-training, was able to communicate. So that sort of softened the blow a little bit. And you was able to message just before you actually flew out. But then it went back to old-fashioned blueies.
Well, of course, you could write then and read. So.
Yeah, I could write and read, so it made it a lot more easier. I could have a bit of privacy in my room and write to my dad and, express how I felt. And, we'd still have a laugh. And you sent me letters from, I can't remember if it was Dave the Spider.
Camel Spider.
Camel Spider. So, Iraq was definitely a changing point for me.
And then, of course... casualties were coming. There was a bit of a blackout at one time.
Yeah, there was a little period of where there was no comms, which was quite frightening because the previous lot that had gone out was actually a friend of mine's dad, who's my godfather.
One para.
Yeah, one para, and
beginning of Telic, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they were having comms quite frequently, blueies and all that lot, and we had a period where it went very quiet and. I was a bit more understanding. I thought, something's not quite right here. But, we got back in contact with blueies and stuff. So that was definitely a good point. A bit of a morale boost, really.
Yeah. And then, of course, Mum sat you down.
Well, with the casualties coming through, obviously, like you stated before, you'd overhear other kids saying, oh, so-and-so's dad's been injured and et cetera, and it did make your bum go a bit crazy. Yeah. But when I came home from school one day, my mum said, "Oh, right, kids, come sit down." And we sat down at the dining table, and she said, "Right, your dad's been wounded." And of course, straight away, my brother and me are looking at each other, going, "Oh my gosh, what's happened? What's happened?" Has he lost a leg? Has he lost an arm? Because that's what we kept hearing, amputees and stuff. So it was very nerve-wracking. And then obviously Mum said, no, your dad's fine. He's okay. So it was okay then. We started to think, all right, he's been wounded, but it's nothing major. And at the time, the casualties were so quick. There was no gradual build-up. It's bam, there. And the schools and obviously the families weren't prepared for it. So the head teacher would come into a classroom and say, I don't know, Amy Smith, you need to come with me. And they would then tell you, your dad's been wounded, you need to go home. And I remember sitting in the classroom and I'd already been briefed by my mum. And she came in and she called my name and I stood up because it was very military styled in the school. We'd stand outside and it would be a roll call. We'd line up in straight lines. They'd call out everyone's names. Yep, everyone's there. Into the classroom, you'd walk in. So I stood up, acknowledged my head teacher, and she said, your dad's been wounded. You need to go home. And I said, no, I know my dad's been wounded. And I just sat back down because I thought, there's nothing I can do. He's fine. So yeah.
So that was a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it must be, I don't know, but it's hard for me to sort of look at it from that angle because I was away doing what I was doing. But, to be a child of a soldier, especially at you're that age where, you're not a baby, but you've got that understanding.
Yeah.
And, you see stuff on the news or you hear other people talking and then especially on the Maricourt Patch, people talk. It must have been quite tough,
it was really tough. It must have been tough. A lot of the military children that were up there, the Pad Brats, we found comfort in talking to each other rather than our parents. We'd sit on the playground, and that's when I started to know the difference between the Pad Brats and the civvy children, because they'd all be playing on the swings and the slides, and then you just see little groups sat on the floor on the field, just chatting, really, just saying, oh, my dad's still out there, or oh, my dad's been wounded, he's coming home. And it was just a massive eye-opener for, especially for the civvy parents. They'd go and call their kids in for dinner, and they would just see these groups of children just sitting on the floor discussing war, and
it's a lot to take.
It was a lot, and
I don't think anyone was really prepared, because obviously you'd had little conflicts leading up to that. But when Iraq and especially Afghanistan, I mean, we didn't experience Afghanistan, didn't go to Afghanistan, but that's when casualty numbers were a lot higher.
Yeah, and
that must have been horrendous. And I'm sure there's some absolute story. I know you like a big supporter, or you not a supporter in contributions, but I know you're really into Scottish Little Soldiers.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic charity, and we're trying to sort something out where we can do some sort of fundraising event for Scottish Little Soldiers. But I think prior to that, I don't think there was really anything.
No, there wasn't anything about.
And even Help the Heroes wasn't formed in 2004. So I don't think we were really prepared for that.
No, there was no preparation.
The casualty notification system wasn't fantastic.
No, that wasn't.
There was a lot of holes, and thankfully they all got filled, and they got their act together. I've still heard some horror stories, but at least they got their act together a little bit more. Yeah. So then after that, then I was posted away, and obviously you stayed on the Married Quarter patch. Was away for about 10 years, 11 years. Yeah, the separation.
Yeah, that was.
Back at weekends and here and there, but
it was still difficult. I do remember, birthdays being missed, Christmases at times, or you'd be home and then you'd get called, and it was a very challenging time. But it was.
Of course, by now you're at secondary school.
Yes, I'm at secondary school by now, and it. In the logic of things, it made sense for us to stay where we was on the Married Quarters, because I was in secondary school. It's a big thing. Primary's not so bad, but secondary, you really need to focus on your education, and up and moving all the time is not fantastic.
I know a lot of kids do go through that.
Yeah, a lot of children do.
You were lucky enough that
we were in a position where we didn't have to do that. But obviously it was very challenging, because I went from a tiny little village primary school that understood the military a heck of a lot, to then go to a secondary school where I think I only met one other child whose dad was, I believe he was in the RAF. So, to go from having lots of support to no support was horrific. My mum would go to parents' evenings, and you'd get little sarky comments from the teachers. Another dad not turning up. And I remember my mum's blood boiling, because, she was thinking, no, he's not, he's doing his job. He's a soldier. But we never rose to their pettiness, really. But it was very, very difficult time to, have that distance on quite a long period of time.
And of course, as you was going through secondary school, because Stephanie had been diagnosed diabetic at age 4.
Yes.
And then when you were going through secondary school, you showed an interest in thinking about a career in the army yourself.
Yes. I remember when I was a little girl, my mum would say to me, what do you want to be when you're older? And, most kids say astronaut, doctor, princess. I was adamant I wanted to be a soldier. So obviously when I was diagnosed diabetic at 4 years old, type 1, I didn't realise that it would have an effect on my career choice.
Yeah.
So when I got into secondary school, I decided to start training, getting physically fit. I sort of knew the rules and, fitness tests, etc. So I started training, got near the age where I could, enlist. I wanted to join. I wanted to be a soldier. And of course, it all got shattered.
Your mum sat you down with your mum?
Yeah. You were at the table, but you knew my passion.
Yeah.
My mum said, I'm sorry, darling, you can't go in. So
that was a big blow, wasn't it?
It was a massive blow. I was really rebellious. I hated it. I thought, well, what am I meant to do now? My whole career plan has gone down the chute. So yeah, when I turned 17, obviously I knew my career was gone.
Yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah.
But you'd, because you'd be, up until that, right from a young age, certainly remembrance parades and that, your mum would take you along, your nan would be there, your granddad when he was still alive.
Yeah.
And your brother, obviously, he was in the Sea Cadets.
Yeah.
So he'd be marching the parade, I'd be marching the parade, and you'd see all that, and you'd be in the British Legion afterwards, maybe Margate or Ramsgate Legion.
Yeah.
With all of that. So all that, it was very, very military for you.
Yeah, I was always going along to parades, always going along to between Margate Royal British Legion, which is no longer there, and Ramsgate Royal British Legion. I basically grew up in those buildings, which was amazing. I love hearing the bands, the drums piping up, and it was just amazing.
And you managed to join the British Legion?
I joined the British Legion at Ramsgate when I was 17. And it sort of sunk into me that, I can't be in the forces. What can I do? So I thought, I'll contribute to the Royal British Legion. And I sat down with my dad one day and I said, Dad, I want to get on parade. So I want to be a part of it. I can't be a soldier, but I want to help.
But rather than stand on the bylines, you wanted to actually get in.
I wanted to actually get in amongst it. And, so,
and that's when I give you that envelope, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I received, I was very lucky to receive these off of my dad. He was given these by his grandfather, which is my great-grandfather, and original ribbons. And it was an absolute honour to have that pinned onto my chest. The first
obviously on the right hand side.
On the right hand side, because
and
I didn't earn them.
For your great granddad.
And I wore them for my
remembrance parades.
Yeah, and it was such an honour to carry on his memory. He done a lot, and to have the honour of putting them on and getting them out there, especially with original ribbons. That's since
and
years
I think
and
that
years.
That sort of helped, because I remember you being quite young on, let's say 17 or whatever, on the Remembrance Parade, and seeing some of the veterans, not World War I veterans at that stage, but just other veterans that may be a bit frail or disabled, and you sort of.
Yeah, I wanted to help them because you had a
soft spot for them.
I do. I have a soft spot for all service personnel, all veterans, and especially the more frail, because they're stubborn. Let's be honest. They're stubborn. They don't want to sit down. They want to stand up. They want to pay their respects to their fallen comrades. So, I became basically a public leaning post on parade sometimes. I'd stand there and they'd lean on me just so they didn't have to sit down. And I'd pass. My dad always told me, carry a little bit of port in your pocket. So I'd get my port out and I'd share it with the veterans. And it just felt so humbling. And of course,
hearing the stories and that.
Yeah, the stories just used to melt my heart. And, they always say, oh, I'm not the heroes, it's the ones in the ground. So pulled at your heartstrings a lot, and you just feel like you're doing something, making them recognise for what they've done, what they've sacrificed. So yeah, that was a really good thing for me. And, a couple of times I said to my dad, I love being on parade. It's fantastic. And I managed to get a Royal British Legion beret, didn't I?
Yeah.
So, and then when I started wearing that on parades, I noticed people were coming up, and first time dads, would come up and be like, oh, what's it like being a kid in the army and stuff like that? How do I explain things to my child? So it was a real accomplishment to help that way.
And then, of course, that all sort of come to an end. The army days were over.
Yeah.
And then you got into a bit of shooting.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you did. You got into a bit of shooting. We started off with just air rifles and air pistols.
Yeah.
And then out in Germany with our friends, you were firing all sorts of weapon systems out there.
Yeah, that was
the rules, the regulations out in Germany, a little bit, firearms regulations a little bit different to UK. So you got to fire stuff that you might not have fired as a civilian in the UK.
Yeah.
And then you got your own shotgun at one time. A bit of hunting,
Yeah.
rat shooting. And
Ratting was very interesting.
you enjoyed that?
It was a good laugh. It was nice to get out in the fresh air and just have a bit more quality time with you, really. 'Cause
Yeah.
I missed out on so much time. So yeah, having that bit of one-to-one daddy-daughter
around the woods.
time.
Yeah.
Walking around the woods, having a laugh.
Quad bike riding.
Yep, quad bike
Up
riding.
the mountains
That was a
in
good
South
laugh.
Wales. You did like riding the quad around, didn't you?
I did.
Up the mountains.
Bit of freedom.
So that was all, that was that really, wasn't it? And it's a shame. I think if you, because you had a big interest, all right, big interest in shooting and you was fit,
Yeah.
all right, apart from the diabetes, doesn't make you unfit. You were still a fit person with your diabetes.
Yeah.
But, the army wouldn't, or the forces won't accept you with that. I get that. Not even the reserve forces, obviously. But, you were fit, you liked shooting, you understood the military sort of life.
Yeah.
You understood so many things going for you.
Yeah.
And I think you would have gone into the cadets. You did go down for a short while.
I actually went down to the Army Cadets down in Dover. And I went into the office and had a chat with them. And
I think you was rebelling though, because you knew you couldn't go any further.
Yeah, I knew I couldn't go any further. And I do remember the gentleman speaking to me in the office, and he said, "Why don't you come back as an instructor?" He said, "Because you're going to outshine my best recruits." And, a lot of the children that were in that cadet force come from quite rough backgrounds, bless them, and they wanted to better themselves. So I just thought, okay.
Yeah, I think what it was, I think if you knew you was going to go into the army at a later stage, I think you would have gone into the cadets and give it your all to prepare you for army service. But I think at that stage you knew, I think you thought maybe that it was, what's the point in going into cadets because I'm never going to get into the regular army. You want to use that as a learning stage to get further on.
It was just,
and so you've been the idea really, didn't you? I think it's a shame, but life deals you some cracking blows, doesn't it? Some crappy blows, and
it definitely does.
But you're there every year on Remembrance Parade.
Yeah,
your great granddad's medals on, and you march, and it's not the end of the world in that respect. You've got your life now.
Yeah,
changed.
I talk to my little one all the time. I've made sure she goes along, pays her respects. We see an old veteran, bless him, with his poppy pill box, and we're back and forth all the time, just chucking whatever change we have. Because every little helps really.
Because I think if you had gone in, I know you were, like I say, you were keen on shooting, you were fit, you understood the military thing. I was going to mention this earlier, I got sidetracked. And then you had a great interest in horses from quite a young age.
Yes, I did.
And you still have.
Yeah.
So you were riding at quite a young age. I can't remember what age you started riding horses.
My first experience was a birthday party. I think I was about 6, nearly 7 years old. And then I started riding just before I turned 8.
So my question is, I think I know the answer. My question is, if you hadn't have been barred from service because of your diabetes, and you had gone in the cadets, blah, 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 and would you gone Army, Navy, Air Force? Army. And what would you have gone in? What would your first choice? When you join up the Army, they ask you first, second, third choices. Would you have had 3 choices or you only had 1 choice?
For me, it would have just been 1. I had my heart and soul on King's Troop.
King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Yeah. Yeah, because
1,000%.
Obviously you like the ceremonial side of life.
Yeah.
And I know you've watched them a lot of time. And of course, you like the equestrian side of life.
Yeah, I do.
So it would have been perfect for you.
Definitely.
It is a shame. It does make you wonder when you see, for instance, like athletes. I can't remember the name, the guy that was the Olympic rower.
Yes.
I can't remember
his name
but
either.
He was diabetic, and there he was. I do understand it from a military point of view, because obviously if we started to have people with diabetes, type 1 diabetes in the forces, and they were deployed, they could be a liability, getting the insulin out to them can't be. But you would think that some roles in the Army, maybe a non-deployable role, in a home service only, that there would be an opportunity. The Army's in a recruiting crisis, and it has been for some time. And if now letting people come in with beards, the hair regulations for females, the hair hasn't got to be up in tight buns. They're making some leeway to attract people to join. And what I was driving at was maybe if they'd opened their doors to people, looked at their diabetes, because you can drive a car if you're diabetic. They allow you to, you've got to prove yourself medically fit, and you're controlling your diabetes, and they'll let you drive a car. So what I was saying is, why didn't the army release certain roles to type 1 diabetics that wouldn't put them in danger, like being deployed into a war zone where they can't get insulin to you? That's what I was saying. And that was something like a ceremonial role, like that, non-deployable would have been ideal for you, and you'd have had a career and you'd have given it your all.
Yeah.
It would have helped numbers, maybe. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think about that.
I mean, I can't exactly say when it was. You'd probably have to Google it, but there was a petition that came out at one point. It never made it to Parliament. There was just not enough signatures, but they were saying about, people with medical conditions being able to join, but not have, like my dad stated, you don't get deployed, you work here in the UK, and do job roles from back here. But it never got enough signatures, so it just didn't go any further, which was, I remember it coming up on the screen and I signed it straight away, and I was over the moon. I was like, come on, we could do this. And it didn't happen. Yeah,
it's a real shame. I think, like I say, with the recruiting crisis, maybe they've missed a trick there. I don't know too much about deployability for people with some form of illness, long-term illness or whatever conditions, but there's got to be something that could be looked at. I think there should have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, is there anyone you'll say hello to before you go?
Just to everyone that's subscribed to the channel, you're all amazing people, and I think you all do things in your own way fantastically. You all suffer from different things, and it's nice to see the support coming together. It's fantastic.
A lot of banter on the channel.
Yeah, I'm loving the banter.
You do watch the comments, so
I watch the comments.
Give Stephanie a shout in the comments if you want, and I'm sure she'll appreciate that. So Stephanie, thanks for taking the time to sit down and waffle with me for a little while. And so that's it. There's some more stuff coming up. Hopefully I can get some more people to interview of interest. I say today's one a little bit different. I've been interviewing a couple of veterans. As you know, you've seen the one with Mike. Obviously, I interviewed Trace around some time ago, and a good mate of mine, artillery veteran Mark. We interviewed him, and this is the first time we've interviewed someone that's not a veteran, which is pretty cool. So, as always, troops, stay tuned. Thanks for your support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider it. I'm not saying do it. I'm saying consider it. Until the next time, then, troops, and it won't be long. Remember,
let's tab.
Let's tab.